The sound of her laugh still rings in my ears. Controlled, but sharp enough to tear through 27 years of motherhood. I froze halfway to my seat as it happened, that small bitter sound escaping her lips. I knew it wasn't nervousness. It was amusement. My daughter was laughing at me. I'd imagined this day so many times. The courtroom filled with people, justice being served, truth finally standing tall. I thought she'd at least look ashamed. But when I turned my head, she looked away, whispering something to her husband. He shook his head slowly and smiled, that same smug, dismissive smile he'd worn the day I begged him to leave my house. I wanted to shout, to remind everyone in that room that I was her mother, not some foolish old woman. But my throat locked. My legs carried me forward like they were made of glass. The courtroom smelled of paper and dust. The air was heavy with whispers. Every step I took echoed louder than I wanted it to. When I reached my seat, I glanced at her again. She looked perfect, composed, hair tied neatly, her black suit pressed as if she belonged there more than I did. And maybe she did. My daughter always had a way of fitting in wherever I didn't. I tried to focus on the judge's bench, on the cold wooden floor, on anything that could keep me from breaking. But my eyes betrayed me. They wandered back to her face. The face I once kissed goodnight. The face that used to press against my chest when she was scared of the dark. Now it was the face of my enemy. "Are you all right, Mrs. Nassim?" the bailiff whispered as he passed by. I nodded quickly, pretending I hadn't just swallowed a lifetime of shame. "Yes," I lied, "I'm fine." He didn't believe me. No one did. They were all looking at me like I was lost, the pitiful mother who didn't know when to stop fighting. But they didn't see what I saw. They didn't know that everything I'd built, everything I'd saved, had been taken by the two people sitting across from me. I looked at the file in my lap, my life compressed into thin white pages. My husband's name, my daughter's signature, the property deed, the betrayal. For a moment I thought of standing up and walking out. I could leave, disappear, start again somewhere quiet. But then I remembered the night my husband died. His last words were simple. "Take care of her, even when she hurts you." I had no idea how deeply those words would one day cut. I remember the first time Rashid came to our house. Charming, respectful, full of sweet promises. He said he'd make my daughter happy. He said I reminded him of his own mother. I believed every word. Now, as he sat beside her with his hand resting over hers, I wondered if he was proud of what he'd done. He didn't even look at me. Just that tiny smirk. Like victory already belonged to him. The judge entered. Everyone rose. I followed, though my knees trembled. The silence was thick, almost holy. But in that silence I heard it again, my daughter's voice soft and low. "She looks so lost," she murmured to Rashid. And he whispered back, "She always does." My chest tightened. My palms turned cold. I stared straight ahead, refusing to let the tears win. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Not her. Not him. The judge began speaking, but I barely heard his words. I was somewhere else, in our old living room, watching her study for her exams, cheering when she brought home her first job letter. I was hearing her laugh again, but back then it was full of life, not poison. What happened to us? To me. To the promise that family meant forever. I tried to trace the moment she stopped seeing me as her mother and started seeing me as her obstacle. Maybe it was when I refused to sell the house. Maybe when I asked questions she didn't want to answer. Maybe it didn't matter anymore. The judge cleared his throat. The sound snapped me back into the present. "Let's begin," he said. And in that moment something inside me shifted. This wasn't about the house anymore. It wasn't even about betrayal. It was about my name, the one they tried to erase from the documents, from the memories, from the very walls I built. I sat up straighter, adjusted my shawl, and met my daughter's eyes for the first time that day. She blinked, once, twice, but didn't look away. Fine. Let her watch. Let her see what happens when a mother decides she has nothing left to lose. Cliffhanger, emotional sting. When the judge said, "Let's begin," I realized I wasn't just fighting for property, I was fighting for my name. The house still smells like him. Even now, years after my husband's death, I can close my eyes and feel him in the walls, the warmth of his laughter, the weight of his silence. That house wasn't just brick and paint. It was memory. It was promise. It was us. After the courtroom hearing that morning, I sat alone in my car and drifted back to where it all began. We built that house together. Two dreamers with more love than money. Every paycheck went into a new corner. He painted the ceilings himself. I planted the garden with bare hands, refusing to wear gloves because I wanted to feel the soil that would one day feed our family. And when our daughter was born, he carved her name into the wooden swing in the backyard. I can still see his handwriting burned into the plank. Amira. She loved that swing. She used to run toward it after school, her backpack flying behind her like wings. I remember watching from the kitchen window, smiling, believing she was safe, that as long as she was under our roof, nothing could touch her. I was wrong. When my husband died, the house felt like a coffin. I spent nights in the living room, talking to his photograph. I would say, "Don't worry, I'll keep it standing." But keeping it standing became harder each year. The repairs, the bills, the loneliness. All of it piled up. Amira began visiting less. Rashid started answering my calls for her, claiming she was busy, tired, overwhelmed. And when they came one Sunday afternoon with papers in hand, I didn't question why. "Mom," she said softly, "we just need your signature so the bank can refinance. Still your house. You'll just make it easier for us to manage the taxes." I remember how her voice trembled when she said it. I wanted to believe she was nervous because she cared. Rashid placed a pen between my fingers. "It's just routine paperwork, Amma. You trust us, don't you?" Trust. Such a beautiful word, until it's weaponized. I didn't even read the full page. My eyes blurred over the lines, my hands shaking from grief and fatigue. My husband's death was still fresh, and my daughter's smile was the only thing holding me together. So I signed. And just like that, I gave away the house that raised her. After they left, I stood in the empty hallway and felt something hollow expand inside me. The walls seemed to echo differently, as if they already knew what I had done. I touched the kitchen counter where Amira had spilled milk as a child, the door frame where we marked her height every year. Each mark felt like a wound now. I told myself I was doing the right thing, securing her future, making sure she'd never struggle the way we did. But deep down I think I knew. I just didn't want to believe my child could hurt me. Months passed quietly. I noticed small changes, her tone growing sharper, Rashid's visits more controlling. He began bringing strangers to inspect the house. Once I overheard him say, "It's a large plot, could easily sell well." Oh, that word burned in my ears. When I asked Amira about it, she smiled and said, "You worry too much, Mom." I tried to laugh it off. I even baked her favorite apple pie the next time she came over, hoping sweetness could fix what was breaking. She didn't eat much. She barely looked at me. Late one night, I found the old property documents tucked inside my husband's diary. His handwriting, his signature, real, alive, untouched. I pressed the papers to my chest and cried. That house wasn't just land. It was the last piece of him I had. And I had handed it away. I started noticing the way Rashid looked at me then, not as a mother-in-law, but as an obstacle. I'd see him whispering to Amira, their faces turning serious whenever I walked in. Sometimes she'd catch me staring and force a smile, but it never reached her eyes. There was distance now, cold and deliberate. A month later she came again, dressed in a navy blue suit, the same one she wore in court years later. She placed her hand over mine and said, "Don't worry, Mom. I'll take care of it." Her tone was soft, rehearsed, the way people speak to someone they've already betrayed. I remember thinking, she's grown into such a confident woman. I was proud and terrified. Now, sitting in this courtroom years later, that same sentence repeats in my head like a curse. "Don't worry, Mom. I'll take care of it." She did take care of it. She took care of everything, my trust, my name, my home. And as I watched her laugh under her breath today, I realized the truth I'd been avoiding all along. It wasn't Rashid who destroyed me first. It was my own love. Blind, unconditional, and tragically misplaced. Cliffhanger, emotional sting. The day I signed the papers, she whispered, "Don't worry, Mom. I'll take care of it." Now, that promise echoes in the courtroom like a curse. I used to think a smile was a sign of kindness. Now I know it can also be the mask of a thief. Rashid had that kind of smile. The one that made people trust him instantly. When he first came into our lives, he brought flowers every week and called me Amma with such warmth that it melted the last bits of loneliness I carried after my husband's death. He held doors open, fixed leaky taps, praised my cooking. Thought, my daughter is lucky. She found a good man. I didn't know that behind that gentle grin, he was studying every weakness I had, every empty space he could fill with control. After Amira married him, things changed quietly. It wasn't sudden like a storm. It was slow, deliberate, almost polite. Rashid began helping me manage things my husband used to handle. The bank, the bills, the land tax. He spoke with a confidence that made me feel foolish for asking questions. "Amma, you don't need to worry about these things," he'd say with that disarming smile. "You've done enough. Let me take care of it." And I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe someone could take care of me again. When my health began to decline, I was grateful he was around. My hands would tremble sometimes, and there were mornings when the room spun if I stood up too fast. He noticed everything. "Amma, you should rest," he said one afternoon, bringing me tea. "Don't stress about paperwork or calls. I'll handle them." I remember smiling weakly and saying, "You're a good man, Rashid." He only smiled back, but this time I swear it didn't reach his eyes. Weeks passed, and I started feeling shut out of my own life. Letters stopped coming to the house. Bank people called Rashid directly instead of me. Even when I tried to ask Amira, she'd change the topic. "Mom, please," she'd sigh. "You're not well. Let Rashid handle the finances. It's for your own good." That phrase, "for your own good," became the justification for everything they did. One evening I walked into the living room and saw Rashid on the phone, speaking in low tones. His voice was polite but sharp. "Yes, the transfer should be processed next week. Yes, both signatures are valid." He turned quickly when he saw me. "Who was that?" "Yes." He smiled. That same practiced, perfect smile. "Just a friend from the bank, Amma. Nothing important." I nodded, but something in my stomach turned. My husband had always warned me about charmers. He once said, "The most dangerous people are the ones who make you feel safe while they rob you." Back then I laughed. Now I wish I had listened. One day, Rashid came home holding a thick envelope. "Amma," he said, sitting across from me, "there's a new policy for widows. You can sign this and get monthly benefits. It'll help cover your medicines." I hesitated. Shouldn't I read it first? He chuckled softly, reaching over to pat my hand. "Of course, but it's all legal jargon. I've already gone through it. Just a formality." His hand lingered a second too long. That touch didn't feel kind anymore, it felt like pressure. Still I signed. My hand was trembling, my vision slightly blurry from the pills. He thanked me, kissed my forehead, and left the room whistling. I didn't know it then, but that signature would haunt me. Days later, the bank called asking for me by name. A polite woman said, "Mrs. Rahman, just confirming the finalization of the deed transfer. Congratulations." Froze. Transfer. What transfer? There was a pause. "It's under your authorization, ma'am. Signed and verified by both you and your late husband." My breath stopped. "My late husband?" "Yes," she said casually. "Dated April 14th last year. But my husband died the year before that." The phone slipped from my hand. I could hear the dial tone buzzing like a wasp in my ear, but all I could see was that signature, the one I'd memorized after years of seeing him write it on bills, cards, letters. Strong, confident, identical. Only it couldn't be real. I stumbled to the drawer where I kept his old documents, flipping through the yellowed papers. My hands shook as I compared the loops and strokes. The signature on that transfer paper was too perfect, too alive. He'd been gone for a year. I confronted Rashid that evening. "Why is your name on a document with my husband's signature dated after his death?" He didn't blink. He didn't even flinch. Instead he smiled. "Loli. Amma," he said softly. "Grief makes people remember dates wrong. You must be mistaken." I wanted to scream. My chest burned with anger and disbelief. "Don't you dare lie to me," I whispered. "That's forgery." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Careful, Amma. Words like that can destroy families." Then he smiled again, calm, polite, terrifying. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, clutching my husband's photo. Rain lashed against the glass like restless hands. I kept hearing Rashid's words echo in the dark. "Careful, Amma." He was warning me. Not out of love but out of power. I realized then that the house, the money, everything was already slipping from my hands. And my own daughter was letting it happen. Cliffhanger, emotional sting. The next morning I opened the drawer again, and there it was. My late husband's signature, dated a full year after his death. They stole my home while I was still living in it. And the cruelest part, my own daughter signed the papers. The evening it happened, the sun had already begun to set, spilling an orange haze across the street. I remember carrying a small bag of groceries, the plastic handles digging into my trembling fingers. My knees hurt that day, but I was looking forward to a quiet dinner, lentil soup maybe with some bread. But when I reached the gate, I saw two men in uniform standing by the front door, measuring the walls with a metal tape. Another man was scribbling notes on a clipboard. First I thought they had the wrong house. "Excuse me," I said, my voice uncertain. "What are you doing?" One of them didn't even look up. "Surveying for transfer clearance, ma'am. This property's under reassignment." The words didn't make sense. Transfer clearance. I looked at the house. My house, and felt a chill run through my chest. "This is my home," I said firmly. Finally the man glanced at me, expression bored. "Then you should talk to the new owner." That sentence hit harder than a slap. The new owner. I stepped inside, pushing past them, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely breathe. The living room was the same, yet it felt different, invaded. There were papers on the coffee table, an open folder, and my daughter's handwriting on a sticky note. "Pending confirmation." My hand shook as I picked it up. I called her immediately. Once. No answer. Called again. Her husband answered instead. "Yes, Amma." His voice was calm, polite, that same poison wrapped in silk. "Where's Amira?" I demanded. "She's busy," he said. "We're finalizing some things." "What things?" "What's happening to my house?" Then soft laughter. "Amma, everything's legal. You signed the documents yourself." "I didn't," shouted. "I never signed." The line went dead. For the next 2 days she didn't pick up. Not once. I barely ate, barely slept. Every creak in the house sounded like footsteps, like someone trying to take what was left of me. I sat by the window, clutching the land papers I'd found, comparing signatures, dates, ink shades. I wasn't crazy. I knew my own handwriting, my husband's, my own history. They had taken everything. Quietly. Like thieves in the dark. On the third evening my phone finally rang. It was her. I almost cried hearing her voice. "Amira," I whispered. "Why are there people in my house? What's happening?" There was a pause. No warmth. Just distance. "It's done, Mom," she said flatly. "It's not your house anymore." My throat closed. "What do you mean, not my house? I raised you here. Your father. Dad's gone," she cut in coldly. "And you can't manage things anymore. Rashid and I handled it. You'll be better off somewhere smaller." Smaller. As if I were a burden. "Amira, listen to me," I begged. "That house is all I have left. It's your father's memory, our family's heart. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Her voice cracked slightly, but she steadied it fast. Please don't call again about this. It's done. Then silence. Not a goodbye. Not even a sorry. Just click. I dropped the phone. My knees buckled. The room spun. For a moment, I thought I was having a heart attack. My chest burned, my breath shallow. I pressed my hand against the wall, trying to steady myself, but everything felt unfamiliar, hollow. This house had seen birthdays, weddings, laughter, and now it was the scene of my betrayal. The laughter that once echoed in its halls was gone, replaced by the cold ticking of the clock. That night, I sat on the floor, surrounded by boxes of old memories. Wedding photos. My daughter's baby shoes. Letters my husband had written from his office in the early years. I looked at each one and wondered when love had turned into greed. Maybe it was never love at all. Maybe it was just convenience. A daughter who loved her mother when it was easy, but not when it cost her something. At dawn, the sound of footsteps outside woke me. I opened the door, and there it was, a folded paper taped right to the front. The words blurred as I read them, my eyes stinging with disbelief. Eviction notice. Effective immediately. Issued under the authority of Rashid and Amira Khan. My own blood had signed me out of my life. The walls seemed to close in. The house didn't feel like mine anymore, and perhaps legally it wasn't. But my memories were still carved into every corner, every doorframe, every faded mark where Amira had drawn on the wall as a child. You can steal property. You can forge a name. But you can't erase what a home remembers. I sank to the floor, the notice still trembling in my hands. Outside, the morning was unnaturally quiet. Inside I felt something die, not hope, not even love. Just the illusion that blood ever meant loyalty. Cliffhanger, emotional sting. The next morning, I found an eviction notice taped to my door, signed by my own child. The first night I slept in my car, the street light outside my old house flickered like it was mocking me. Every time it dimmed, I prayed it would stay dark, so no one would see me like that. The eviction had happened quietly. No shouting, no scene. Just a folded notice, a few packed boxes, and the sound of a key turning in a lock that no longer belonged to me. I parked my old Suzuki across the street, under a tree that half hid me from view. From there I could still see the windows of the house glowing. My house, warm and alive with the light that used to be mine. I watched the curtains move. Someone was inside. Probably Rashid, probably her. Maybe she was laughing. Maybe she was pretending I didn't exist. That first night, the car smelled of dust and old perfume. I used my shawl as a blanket, folded my handbag under my head, and tried to convince myself it was temporary. It's just for tonight, I whispered to no one. But even my voice sounded like it didn't believe me. Sleep came in fragments. Every sound, barking dogs, passing motorcycles, footsteps, jolted me awake. The fear wasn't of strangers. It was of being seen. Seen as the mother who lost everything. The second night, I woke up to the sound of laughter from the house. I looked up through the windshield and saw silhouettes. A dinner gathering maybe. The lights in the dining room were on. The same room where we once celebrated birthdays and anniversaries. I remembered how Amira used to climb onto her father's lap, stealing bites of cake with her tiny hands. He'd laugh and I'd pretend to scold her. And now she was there again, sitting in the same chair, but this time with him. The man who helped take everything. By morning, I drove to the nearest park just to wash my face in the restroom sink. The mirror there was cracked, and the water was cold. I caught my reflection and almost didn't recognize myself. My hair had grayed more than I remembered. My skin looked thinner. I wasn't a woman anymore. I was a ghost that hadn't yet accepted it was dead. Days turned into a strange rhythm, sitting in the car during the evenings, walking around during the day to avoid attention. Some neighbors saw me. Some even waved awkwardly before pretending not to. Others whispered when they thought I couldn't hear. She used to live there. Her own daughter, can you believe? Shame clung to me like humidity. I didn't blame them for talking. If I had seen someone like me, maybe I'd have looked away too. On the fifth night, Rashid called. I didn't want to answer, but something in me needed to hear his voice, to understand why. Hello. His tone was casual, almost amused. You should have known when to stop controlling her, he said. My hands trembled. What have you done to her? He laughed softly. Nothing she didn't ask for. You raised her to be strong, didn't you? Well, now she's stronger than you. I bit back the tears. You'll regret this, Rashid. He chuckled. Regret? Noama. We're living your dream, the house, the peace, the name. You should be proud. Then the line went dead. I sat there for hours after that, staring at my phone, waiting for it to ring again. Never did. Few cars passed. Some kids walked by eating ice cream. The world kept moving like my suffering didn't matter. But inside something hardened. I realized that pity was useless. Waiting was useless. If they wanted me to disappear, I would do the opposite. That night I began writing things down. Dates, times, names. Every phone call, every visit, every word they said. I took photos of the eviction notice, the property transfer papers, even the strange men who had measured the house that day. I started keeping my phone on record during every call, every encounter. I didn't know yet what I was building. A case, a confession, or revenge. But I knew one thing for sure. Silence had never saved anyone. One morning I saw Amira's car pull out of the driveway. She didn't notice me parked under the tree. I watched her go, hair brushed, makeup perfect, phone pressed to her ear. She looked free, unburdened. And that broke me more than anything Rashid could have said. Because it meant she didn't even feel guilty. As the sun set again, I reclined my seat and stared at the house until the lights came on. It still looked beautiful. The house I'd painted with my own hands, the garden I'd watered every dawn. But it was theirs now. At least for the moment. A wind picked up, rustling the leaves outside. My reflection in the car window looked sharper somehow. Eyes tired but alive. And that's when I made a promise to myself. If they wanted me gone, I'd stay. If they wanted me quiet, I'd speak. If they wanted to bury me, I'd rise with every lie they told. That night, I opened my notebook and wrote one line across the top. Everything they did, I will remember. I closed it, placed it on the dashboard, and smiled for the first time in weeks. Because for the first time I wasn't just surviving. I was preparing. Cliffhanger, emotional sting. I started recording everything. Every call, every paper, every insult. If they wanted a war, I would give them one. I didn't walk into her office like a client. I walked in like a ghost, carrying files that smelled of dust, tears, and regret. The waiting area was silent except for the ticking of a wall clock. My hands trembled as I held the worn folder against my chest, the one that contained every lie they told, every signature that wasn't mine. When her assistant called my name, I hesitated. I'd been to banks, to the registrar's office, even to the police once. Each time I was turned away, dismissed with pity or impatience. But this time felt different. When I entered Advocate Farah Malik's office, the first thing I noticed were her eyes. Tired, kind, and knowing. The kind of eyes that had seen too many broken people walk through her door. "Please sit," she said softly. Her voice wasn't rushed, and that alone made me want to cry. For the first few minutes, I couldn't speak. I just opened the folder, spread the papers across her desk, and waited for her to see the betrayal written in ink. She didn't interrupt. She didn't look bored. She just listened, really listened. "I don't want money," I finally said. "I just want my name back." Her eyes lifted from the papers, steady and unreadable. "And your house?" she asked. I looked down at my hands. "That too," I whispered. "It's all I have left of him." Farah leaned back in her chair, fingers pressed together. "Mrs. Nassim," she began gently, "these documents show the property transfer was legal. Your daughter and her husband used power of attorney signed by your late husband." My stomach twisted. But he was already gone. A year gone. She sighed, nodding slowly. "I know. But proving forgery isn't easy. They've built a wall of paperwork between you and the truth. I could feel my chest tighten, the air thinning around me. Then there's no hope. Her lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Paper doesn't lie, but people do. And people always leave traces. Those words sat between us, heavy but alive, like a spark in a room full of shadows. Farah began flipping through my folder, her brow furrowed in focus. I watched her work, the way her fingers traced signatures, her eyes catching details I'd never noticed. "You kept all this?" she asked. "Yes, every page. Every letter." Her tone softened. "That's good. Most people give up before this point." "I almost did," I admitted. But then I remembered something my husband said before he died. That truth doesn't need an invitation. It shows up when it must. For a moment, Farah's expression shifted, admiration mixed with sorrow. She knew what it meant to hold on to hope long after it started to hurt. The office was small but neat, law books lining the walls, certificates framed behind her desk, a half-empty cup of cold tea beside her laptop. Outside the window, rain began to fall, tapping gently against the glass. It reminded me of the nights I spent in my car, watching that same rain slide down my windshield. Except now I wasn't watching. I was ready to act. Farah turned to her computer, typing quickly. The soft clacking of the keys filled the silence. "Your son-in-law," she murmured. "Rashid Malik?" "Yes." She nodded. "We'll start there. Men like him leave footprints, usually financial, sometimes personal. Did he handle your accounts?" "Yes. He said he was helping after my surgery." Farah's eyes darkened. "And your daughter?" "She signed what he told her to sign. She trusted him more than me." Farah didn't judge. She just wrote something in her notes and said quietly, "Then we'll find the moment where trust became a weapon." I sat there for a long time after that, watching her work. For the first time in months, I felt something move inside me. Not rage, not grief, but purpose. She finally looked up. "This will be hard. They'll fight dirty. You'll hear things about yourself you don't deserve to hear. But if you can stand it, I can fight it." I swallowed hard. I've already heard worse, from my own child. A silence followed, deep and heavy. Then Farah reached into her drawer and pulled out a small, weathered folder. "There's something you need to see," she said. She slid a photograph across the table. It was a picture, grainy but clear enough. Rashid was sitting across from a man in a crisp suit, shaking hands in what looked like a bank office. Farah tapped the photo with her pen. "This was taken 6 months before your illness. That man beside him is a senior officer at First City Bank." My throat went dry. "But that's when my accounts started changing." Farah nodded slowly. "Exactly. He was planning this long before you got sick." The room tilted slightly, or maybe it was just me. I gripped the edge of her desk to steady myself. I looked at the photo again. Rashid's confident grin, the quiet satisfaction in his posture. For years I thought he was just a manipulative husband. But this was strategy. Farah closed the folder and met my eyes. "We can prove forgery. But you need to be ready for what comes next." My voice was barely a whisper. "And what's that?" Her expression softened, but her words were sharp. "The truth, Mrs. Nassim. It never comes quietly. Cliffhanger, emotional sting." She slid a photograph across the table. A photo of Rashid meeting with a bank officer long before I fell sick. I thought the worst pain was losing my home. I was wrong. The real pain came when I discovered my daughter's name beside his. Farah called me to her office early one morning. Her tone over the phone was calm, but there was something behind it. Something heavy, restrained. The kind of voice that tells you your life is about to split into before and after. When I arrived, the air in her office felt thicker than usual. She didn't offer tea this time. She didn't even sit right away. Instead, she stood by the window, holding a thin folder between her fingers as if it might burn her. "Mrs. Nassim," she said quietly, "I need you to see something." The folder landed on the desk with a dull thud. My heart followed. Inside were copies of bank transactions. Neat, official, undeniable. Each one stamped with my late husband's name. Except, he'd been dead for 2 years when the first withdrawal was made. My stomach turned. I could feel my pulse in my throat as Farah laid out one page after another. These accounts were opened under your husband's name, she explained. Funds were transferred here before your property was sold. I stared at the numbers. I didn't understand all of them, but I knew what they meant. Theft dressed in legality. Then Farah handed me another page. This is where it gets worse, she said. At the bottom of the form, next to the bank officer's initials, was a familiar signature. Rashid Ahmed. Her pen tapped the signature lightly. His handwriting matches the forged authorization from your husband's file. My throat went dry. I whispered. He planned this all along. Farah didn't respond. She was studying me, waiting for the moment the truth would fully land. And then, slowly, she turned the page. That's when I saw her name. Signed neatly, perfectly. My daughter. Next to authorized by. For a second I couldn't breathe. The letters blurred. I blinked once, twice, but it didn't change. Her name was still there, binding every lie, every theft. She signed this. My voice cracked. Farah nodded. Not once. Several times. Every major withdrawal required her confirmation. I felt my chest cave in. She said she didn't understand the papers. She said he handled everything. Farah looked at me, her eyes soft but unflinching. Maybe she told herself that. Maybe it was easier to believe it wasn't wrong. The office fell silent. Outside, I could hear the faint hum of traffic, the rustle of wind against the window. Inside, the only sound was the paper trembling in my hands. I thought of her, my daughter, as a little girl chasing butterflies in our garden, her laughter spilling into the evening air. I thought of the nights I stayed up sewing her uniforms, the times I skipped my medication so she could have her tuition paid on time. And now her name sat beside his. The betrayal didn't shout. It whispered. It said, "You raised me well enough to know better. And I chose this anyway." Farah finally broke the silence. "We can build a case," she said. "Forgery, fraud, misappropriation of funds, it's all here. But it'll drag your family name through the courts." I didn't answer. I was still staring at the ink. She leaned closer. "If we go public, this won't stay quiet. Rashid will deny everything. Your daughter might too." A bitter laugh escaped me. She already denied me as a mother. What more can she deny now? Farah reached for her pen, her tone careful. "Do you want me to proceed?" I looked up at her. My vision was blurry from tears I didn't realize had fallen. "What choice do I have?" I whispered. Her gaze didn't waver. "There's always a choice. Revenge, or justice." The words hung between us like a storm waiting to break. Revenge. Justice. Two sides of the same knife. I didn't know which one I wanted more. To make them pay, or to make them understand what they destroyed. I imagined walking up to my old house, knocking on that door, and seeing my daughter's face when she realized I knew everything. Would she cry? Would she even care? And Rashid? Would he smirk the way he did when he told me I should have stopped controlling her? Part of me wanted to destroy them both. The other part still remembered the sound of my daughter's first word. Ami. Farah started gathering the papers. "We'll need to trace the assets. Some might still be recoverable. There's also a safe deposit record under your husband's name that doesn't match his known accounts." I blinked. "A deposit record?" She nodded. "Yes. Accessed 3 times after his death." My heart clenched. "By who?" Farah looked at the file again, scanning the printouts. Then she pointed to a code at the bottom of the page. "Same authorization pattern," she said softly. "Same initials. All right, Rashid." It was him again, always him. But as I stared at the code, something inside me shifted. Not anger this time, clarity. He may have stolen my house, my money, even my daughter's loyalty. But he hadn't stolen my truth. And now, with Farah beside me, I had proof. Farah closed the folder, her eyes meeting mine. We can expose them. But once we start, there's no turning back. It'll change everything. I sat in silence, feeling the weight of every page, every betrayal. Then she asked it, the question that cut through everything else. Do you want revenge, she said, or justice? I opened my mouth but no sound came out. Because I didn't know anymore. Because maybe, deep down, part of me still wanted to forgive what couldn't be forgiven. Cliffhanger, emotional sting. When Farah asked, do you want revenge or justice? I couldn't answer. I didn't go there to beg. I went there to warn her. But the moment she opened the door, I realized it was already too late. The air between us was colder than the winter wind outside. My daughter stood in the doorway, arms folded, face blank, as if she'd been expecting me but wished she hadn't. Behind her, Rashid leaned casually against the staircase, that same crooked smirk painted across his face. The house smelled of new paint and expensive candles, the kind I used to buy when she was little, when I wanted our home to smell warm and safe. Now that scent felt like mockery. Amna, I said softly, her name catching in my throat like a thorn. I didn't come to fight. She didn't move. Her eyes flicked briefly toward Rashid before returning to me. Then why are you here? I took a shaky breath. Because I know. That made her flinch. Just slightly, a muscle twitched near her jaw. I know about the account, I continued. The forged withdrawals. Your signature. His. Rashid chuckled behind her. You shouldn't believe everything that woman. What's her name, the lawyer? Tells you. People in her profession love drama. I looked straight at him. Drama doesn't forge dead men's signatures. For a moment no one spoke. The silence was thick enough to choke on. Amna finally broke it, her voice trembling but sharp. You shouldn't have come. I had to, I said. I needed to look at you before the hearing. To ask why. She looked down at the floor, her expression tightening. Why? She repeated, almost laughing. Why, Mom? Maybe because you never let me live my own life. Because everything I did had to be under your shadow. Her words sliced deeper than any court order. I did everything for you, I whispered. Every sacrifice, every night I. You did everything to me, she interrupted. You never trusted me. You treated me like a child even when I had my own home, my own husband. Her voice cracked on that last word, and Rashid stepped forward, laying a hand on her shoulder. Possessive, protective, poisonous. You're wasting your time, he said, eyes locked on mine. Whatever case your lawyer thinks she's building will collapse. You'll embarrass yourself. Just withdraw quietly. I wanted to slap that smile off his face. But instead I turned back to my daughter. Do you even hear yourself? Asked her. You're letting him speak for you now? Amna's lips quivered. She didn't look at me. I took a small step forward, lowering my voice. I found everything. The money. Papers. The proof. You can still tell the truth before this destroys you. Her eyes flicked up at that. I saw the fear she was trying to bury. Stop it, she said quickly, her voice trembling. You don't understand. Done. You can't undo what's been done. I felt tears sting my eyes. You think this is about undoing things? No, Amna. It's about owning what we've done. About facing it. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw regret in her face. A crack, a shadow of the girl I once knew. But Rashid's voice cut through it like a blade. She's leaving, he said. Aren't you, Mrs. Nassim? The way he said my name, stripped of warmth of family, made me realize how completely he had erased me from their world. I straightened my scarf, forcing the tremor out of my voice. You might think you've won. But lies don't stay buried forever. Rashid smirked. Maybe not. But they last long enough. I turned toward the door. My legs felt heavy, but my heart felt heavier. As I reached for the handle, I heard her voice. Soft, almost whispering. You always needed an audience, Mom. Froze. Now you'll get one in court. For a moment I stood there, my hand still on the door, unable to breathe. Her words didn't sound angry, they sounded rehearsed, cold. Something someone had fed her to say. I wanted to turn back, to shake her, to remind her of the nights we used to pray together, of the lullabies I sang when she was sick. But when I glanced over my shoulder, Rashid was already whispering something in her ear, and she was nodding like a child again, obedient, lost. I stepped outside into the freezing air. The door closed behind me with a soft click that felt louder than any slap. For a long while, I just stood there on the porch, staring at the home that used to be mine, the one where I'd taught her to take her first steps, where every wall still carried echoes of our laughter. Now it was his kingdom, and she was his loyal queen. I walked back to my car, my breath fogging up the cold glass, my heart pulsing like a wound that refused to close. Maybe she was right, maybe I always needed an audience. But this time the audience would see her truth, not mine. Cliffhanger. As I started the engine, I whispered to myself, "You wanted a performance, Amna. You'll get one." Tomorrow the courtroom would hear everything, and no one would be laughing. The courtroom was colder than I remembered. Even the walls seemed to breathe judgment. I could feel the stairs pressing against my back as I took my seat beside Farah. My palms were damp, and my heart wouldn't settle. I wasn't nervous for myself anymore. I was nervous for what the truth might do to her, my daughter. Rashid sat across the aisle, leaning casually in his chair, his lawyer whispering in his ear. He looked untouchable, confident, the kind of man who thought the system bent for people like him. My daughter, Amina, sat beside him. Her hair was pulled back tightly, no softness left in her face. She didn't look at me, not once. The judge entered, and everyone rose. The sound of chairs scraping the floor was like thunder to me. When we sat again, Rashid's lawyer, a tall man with an oily smile, stood and adjusted his tie. "Your Honor," he began, "this case is a sad misunderstanding between a mother and her daughter. My client, Mrs. Rashid, has only ever acted in her mother's best interest. Unfortunately, due to age and emotional instability, the plaintiff has become confused about the ownership of the property." The courtroom murmured. My throat burned. He called me unstable. Farah placed a hand on mine under the table. Her touch was steady, an anchor. "Let him talk," she whispered. "We'll burn him with facts." But each word he spoke felt like a match against my dignity. He held up a stack of papers. "Here are the signed transfers, legally processed and verified. This isn't theft, Your Honor. This is love. A daughter taking responsibility when her mother couldn't." My eyes stung. Love. That's what they called it. I turned slightly, catching Amina's reflection in the polished wood. Her lips were trembling, but her eyes remained fixed on the floor. Farah rose next, calm and deliberate. "If this is love," she said, "then why does love come with forged signatures and secret accounts?" The lawyer laughed, dismissive. "Allegations, Your Honor. Nothing more." Farah walked to the center of the courtroom and placed a file on the table. "Not allegations. Evidence." The air shifted. One by one, she laid out the papers we had gathered. The fake withdrawals, the forged property deeds, the false account under my late husband's name. Every page was a piece of my life torn apart and stitched back together by deceit. Farah's voice didn't shake. "These documents show transactions executed after the death of Mr. Karim, the plaintiff's husband. The signatures match Mr. Rashid's handwriting. Expert verification is included." The judge leaned forward. "After his death, you say?" "Yes, Your Honor." All eyes turned toward Rashid. His confident smirk flickered, just slightly, before he looked at Amina. She was pale now. Her fingers clutched the edge of the table like she was drowning. Farah continued. "Furthermore, Mrs. Amina Rashid approved these transfers using her own signature, despite being informed that the funds were inheritance locked under the plaintiff's name." A gasp rippled through the courtroom. I wanted to look away. I wanted to pretend I hadn't heard her name. But I couldn't. That was my daughter. My little girl. My only child. She looked up at me then, for the first time in weeks. Our eyes met, and in that fleeting moment I saw it all. The guilt, the fear, the resentment. It wasn't hatred that broke her. It was shame. Rashid leaned toward her and hissed something under his breath. Her eyes darted away. "Mr. Rashid," Farah said, turning sharply, "would you like to explain this meeting with the bank officer 2 months before your mother-in-law fell ill?" She held up the photograph, the one I'd seen in her office, the one that had changed everything. The courtroom was silent except for the faint hum of the ceiling fan. Rashid's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Rashid himself said nothing. "I don't remember that," he muttered. Farah didn't blink. "You will." The judge took the file, flipping through the documents slowly. "Forgery is a serious allegation, Advocate Malik. Do you have corroboration?" Farah nodded. "We do, Your Honor. Bank verification, handwriting analysis, and transaction timestamps. Every detail accounted for." For a moment I forgot to breathe. I watched Rashid's face crumble, his calm evaporating. Amina closed her eyes. I could see tears forming, but she refused to let them fall. When Farah returned to her seat, she leaned in close. "He's finished," she whispered. "Now we wait." The judge rubbed his temples, clearly weighing the evidence. "We'll take a brief recess before I deliver my statement." The gavel struck. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs as people began to rise, but I stayed seated. My body wouldn't move. Amina did. She stood up abruptly, knocking her chair back. Her shoulders shook as she turned to Rashid. "What did you do?" I heard her whisper. He grabbed her arm, trying to pull her close, but she jerked away. "You said everything was legal." "Keep your voice down," he snapped. Farah and I exchanged a glance. She didn't need to say it, this was the breaking point. For all his arrogance, Rashid hadn't prepared for this. He thought fear would keep her loyal, but he forgot what happens when guilt becomes heavier than love. I turned away, staring at the judge's empty seat. My heart was heavy, but not from anger anymore. It was grief, the kind that comes when the truth finally takes everything you loved with it. When the bailiff called for order again, Rashid and Amina returned to their seats. She kept her head down, her face hidden behind trembling hands. Farah whispered, "Stay calm. He's going to rule in your favor." But I couldn't think about winning anymore. I was watching my family collapse in real time. The judge re-entered. Everyone stood. He looked tired, almost burdened by what he had to say. Then his eyes landed on me, and then on Amina. "A lifetime of trust," he began, "has been replaced with betrayal, forged in greed." My pulse thundered in my ears. He lifted the file in his hand. "The evidence is clear." Then he paused. The words hung there like a final breath. And that's when I heard it, the sound that broke me all over again. Not loud, not performative. Just one raw, broken sound from my daughter's lips. She was crying. And for the first time I didn't know if it was from guilt or loss. Cliffhanger. The judge paused before speaking, and my daughter started crying. When the judge finally spoke, time stopped. Every sound in that courtroom seemed to vanish. The shuffling papers, the ticking clock, even my own heartbeat. "Judgment is hereby entered in favor of the plaintiff." Those words should have brought relief. They should have felt like justice, like closure. But instead they landed in my chest like stones. I had won. And yet I'd never felt so defeated. Rashid's face went pale. His lawyer's mouth opened slightly, as if searching for a word that didn't exist. The officers moved toward him, calm and efficient, like this was routine, just another man caught in his own greed. Beside him, my daughter crumbled. Amina's tears came in slow, silent waves, like she'd been holding them back for years. I wanted to go to her. God knows I did. Every instinct in me screamed to reach out, to hold her like I used to when she was small, when monsters lived only under her bed, not in her marriage. But I didn't move. Because her eyes, when they finally met mine, weren't looking for comfort. They were looking for someone to blame. The judge's voice faded into background noise, Something about restitution, property transfer, sentencing. None of it mattered anymore. Farah's hand brushed mine again. "You did it," she whispered. "It's over." I nodded, but my throat burned. "No," I said softly. "It's never over when blood is involved." A bailiff stepped forward and took Rashid by the arm. The metallic click of handcuffs echoed through the room, sharp and final. He didn't fight. Didn't even look angry. Just turned to Amina and gave her that same condescending half-smile, the one he always wore when he wanted to remind her he still had control. She looked broken. Completely, devastatingly broken. As they led him away, reporters outside the glass doors began snapping photos, flashes bursting like lightning. The sound of chaos seeped into the stillness. I could smell the cold air leaking through the cracks, mixed with sweat and cheap perfume. Amina wiped her tears roughly, like she was ashamed of them. Her voice cracked. "You told them everything." I didn't answer. She took a step closer, her breath trembling. "You could have let it go, Mama. Let it go." My words came out hoarse. "He stole everything your father built. He lied to you. He lied to all of us." Her chin lifted, defiant through her tears. "You ruined my marriage." Flinched. Not because she was wrong, but because a part of me feared she was right. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. There were no words that could fix this kind of fracture. Farah whispered, "Let her speak. Don't defend yourself right now." So I didn't. I just stood there, an old woman in a room that suddenly felt too big for her heart. The officers tightened their grip on Rashid, guiding him toward the exit. He turned his head once, looking back at us, at her. And she looked back too. That single, silent exchange between them carried more poison than any argument ever could. When the doors opened, a gust of cold air swept through the courtroom. Papers fluttered. A few spectators whispered. I wanted to run after her. I wanted to tell her that I hadn't done this to her. I'd done it for her. But the truth was more complicated than either of us could bear. Justice always demands a sacrifice. And sometimes it takes the one thing you were trying to save. I remembered the night her father died, how she clung to me and said, "We'll be okay, Mama. It's just us now." I believed her then. I believed that bond was unbreakable. But standing here, watching her shoulders shake as she cried for a man who destroyed us, I realized something cruel. Sometimes love blinds more than hate ever can. The judge called for order again, his voice echoing faintly, but I couldn't hear him anymore. My focus was on her. My daughter, my blood, my heartbreak wrapped in human form. Farah was packing our papers. "We should go," she murmured. "The press will be waiting." I nodded, still staring at Amina. She had stopped crying now, her face a mask of quiet fury. "Please," I whispered, stepping toward her. "Come home. We can start over." Her expression hardened. "There's nothing left to start." Those words sliced deeper than any betrayal Rashid could have committed. "Don't say that," I pleaded. "I'm still your mother." She gave a faint, bitter laugh. "And I'm still the fool who believed you cared about anything but winning." Before I could respond, the officers began to move Rashid again. Amina turned her head sharply. "Wait," she said, her voice trembling. She walked toward him, ignoring the murmurs, ignoring me. When she reached him, she touched his arm, whispering something I couldn't hear. His head tilted slightly, and for a second I thought maybe, just maybe, she was saying goodbye. But then she looked up straight at me. Her lips parted, her voice steady despite the tears still glistening on her cheeks. "You ruined my life," she whispered. The words struck harder than any verdict. Froze. The room tilted. Rashid smirked, almost triumphant, as if her pain was his final victory. The bailiff guided him through the doors, and they disappeared into the corridor's cold light. I stood there, surrounded by murmurs, papers, and the hollow weight of justice. Farah touched my arm gently. "Come, Mrs. Kareem. It's done." But inside me nothing felt done. My daughter's voice kept echoing, low, broken, endless. "You ruined my life. And for the first time I didn't know if she was wrong. Cliffhanger. As they led Rashid out, she whispered, "You ruined my life." The keys felt strange in my hand. Cold. Heavy. Like they belonged to someone else. When I unlocked the door, the sound echoed through the hallway like a ghost sighing. My house, my home, stood before me again. Legally mine. But as I stepped inside, I realized the papers hadn't given it back. Not really. The air smelled different. Ill. Abandoned. It was the scent of a place that had forgotten laughter. I walked slowly through the living room, the same space where birthdays had been celebrated, where Amina once danced barefoot as a child, spinning in circles until she got dizzy and fell into my arms. Now the walls just stared back, bare, pale, and unforgiving. The furniture was gone. The curtains stripped. Even the rug I'd chosen with such care was missing. But it wasn't the emptiness that hurt. It was the silence. The way it pressed against my chest like something alive, whispering that the house didn't want me anymore. I dragged my hand along the wall, feeling the faint texture of old paint beneath my fingers. "I'm home," I said aloud, just to hear a voice, any voice. But the echo that came back sounded foreign. In the kitchen, sunlight fell through the half-broken blinds, scattering weak stripes across the dusty tiles. I opened a cabinet and found only one chipped mug. My favorite one. The one Amina had painted for me in school. World's best mom. The colors had faded. The handle was cracked. I pressed it to my chest, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. I made tea, though it tasted like ashes. I sat by the window, staring out at the street where neighbors used to wave, used to smile. Now, when they walked by, their eyes slid past me like I was invisible. Maybe they didn't know what to say, or maybe they didn't care. I wondered how rumors had twisted by now. The old woman suing her daughter. The family that tore itself apart for money. The shame that comes dressed as truth. Farah had told me to rest, to celebrate. But how do you celebrate when victory feels like a funeral? As I moved from room to room, I found pieces of the past scattered like bones. A broken hairbrush. Child's bracelet. A family portrait missing from its frame. I stood in Amina's old bedroom doorway. The wallpaper, once pink and full of stars, was peeling now. The mirror was cracked. The sight of it made my knees weak. I sank to the floor and let the memories come one by one. Her laughter. Her first heartbreak. The nights she'd fall asleep on my lap while I stroked her hair. Where had that love gone? When had it turned into distance, then silence, then betrayal? I pressed my palm to the cold floorboards, whispering her name like a prayer. "I did it for you," I said softly. "You just don't see it yet." But even saying it out loud didn't make it true anymore. Outside, the evening wind howled faintly. The shadows stretched longer, and the house creaked like it was exhaling after holding its breath too long. I picked up one of the picture frames I'd left on the counter. The glass was smudged with fingerprints, hers and mine. We were smiling in that photo. The three of us. Me, Amina, and Rashid. Before sickness. Before greed. Before the papers and the lies. I dusted it off with the edge of my sleeve, but I couldn't bring myself to hang it back on the wall. Some victories come too late. And some homes, once broken, never welcome you the same way again. As the light faded, I turned on a single lamp. Its yellow glow filled the room with a dull, tired warmth. I sat there, clutching that picture, staring at nothing. Maybe this was the price of truth. A quiet house, an aching heart, and memories that won't stay buried. I thought about calling her. Just once. To say something, anything. But what could I say now that wouldn't sound like an accusation? I imagined her voice on the other end of the line, cold and distant, the way it was the day she told me, "It's not your house anymore." The same voice that had trembled when she whispered in court, "You ruined my life." I shut my eyes and whispered back, "Maybe I did." The tea had gone cold. The night outside had grown darker, the wind heavier. Every creak of the floorboards felt like footsteps. Like the house remembering me in fragments. Then I saw it. A folded piece of paper, half hidden beneath a stack of unpaid bills on the kitchen counter. My heart stuttered. I reached for it, my fingers trembling before I even touched it. The handwriting was unmistakable. The loops in the letters, the tilt of the M. Amina's handwriting. For a second I couldn't open it. My body froze, my chest heavy with dread and hope all tangled together. I sank into the nearest chair, the letter shaking in my hands. The clock ticked in the silence, each second stretching longer than the last. Whatever was inside that envelope could change everything, or destroy what little was left. I stared at it under the dim kitchen light, my reflection faint in the window behind it, old and tired and afraid. Then I whispered to myself, barely audible, "What have you done, Amina?" Cliffhanger. I found a letter on the kitchen counter, written in my daughter's handwriting. I stared at the envelope for a long time before I dared to open it. It was light. Too light to hold the weight I felt in my chest. Her handwriting danced across the paper like it always had. Neat, careful, a little tilted to the right. The kind of handwriting that once wrote birthday cards and school notes. The kind that said, "Love you, Mom." Now, that same hand had written something that made my fingers tremble. When I unfolded the first page, the scent of her perfume rose faintly, soft jasmine. For a second I almost smiled. Then the words blurred before my eyes. "Mom, I don't expect you to forgive me. But you deserve to know the truth." I read the first line again and again, my throat tightening until I could barely swallow. She confessed everything. Rashid had planned it all, from the forged documents to the fake transfers. He'd told her it was temporary, that we were just restructuring the accounts until I recovered. She said she believed him because she wanted to. Because believing him meant not facing the part of herself that wanted to hurt me too. He told me you always wanted control, that you didn't see me as grown. And he was right, Mom, I wanted to prove you wrong. I wanted to have something that was mine. I pressed my palm against my chest, feeling the sharp ache deep inside. She wasn't cruel. She was broken and I had helped break her. The next lines came like slow blades. "I signed the papers because he said it would make you respect me." I thought I was taking back power. I didn't realize I was handing it all to him. By the time I understood, it was too late. The words swam before me. The room tilted. I could almost hear her voice saying them, low and trembling, like when she was little and trying to confess breaking something precious. I wanted to stop reading, but I couldn't. She described how Rashid began changing once the property was in his name. How he withdrew money behind her back, met people she didn't know, spoke to lawyers late at night. How she started feeling like a stranger in her own house. "He said you'd never forgive me, so I might as well let it all happen." And I did. Because I thought I'd already lost you. The line broke something in me that the courtroom never could. I set the letter down and covered my face with my hands. The sobs came out raw and shaking, the kind that leave you gasping for air. All night I cried for her, for myself, for the years that turned love into suspicion. The walls seemed to hum with memories. Every room felt alive with echoes, her laughter, my voice calling her name, the small arguments that grew into storms. Somewhere in the darkness I whispered to the ceiling, "I never wanted to control you, Amina. I just wanted to protect you." But maybe there isn't much difference between the two when love turns into fear. I went back to the letter, tracing her words with trembling fingers. "When I saw you in court, I wanted to speak. But Rashid squeezed my hand. He said you'd twist my words." I laughed because I didn't know what else to do. "I'm sorry for that." I'll hear that laugh in my head for the rest of my life. My breath caught. That laugh. The one that had cut me open. It hadn't been mockery. It had been panic. I sank into the chair and closed my eyes, letting the sound replay in my head. Softer this time, less cruel. It was the sound of a daughter trapped between guilt and survival. The letter went on, her handwriting growing shakier near the end. "They'll probably sentence him soon. I don't know where I'll go. Maybe away for a while. I just needed you to know that I never stopped loving you. I just didn't know how to love you without losing myself." The last line was almost a whisper on the page. "You always made me feel small. I read it aloud, slowly, the words bitter and tender at once. 'Cause they were true. I had pushed her to be better, stronger, perfect, not realizing that my love sometimes sounded like judgment. And she had mistaken my fear for control, my guidance for pride. We'd both built a wall out of good intentions and hurt. When dawn broke, I was still sitting there, the letter folded beside a cold cup of tea. The first light spilled across the table, catching on the ink where her tears had smudged the page. I thought about writing back, about telling her I forgave her, that I understood, that I, too, had been blind. But every word I imagined felt too small for what I felt inside. Forgiveness, real forgiveness, doesn't always need to be spoken. Sometimes silence is kinder. I folded the letter carefully and placed it inside the drawer of the old wooden table, the one she used to do her homework on. It felt right, somehow, leaving it there, close to where she had once been innocent and mine. The house was quiet again, but the silence felt different now. Not hollow but peaceful, like it had finally exhaled. I stood by the window and watched the sun rise, turning the sky gold and soft. The light touched the walls, the floor, the empty frames. Slowly it reached my hands, and for the first time in years I didn't pull away. Maybe this was what winning felt like. Not joy, not celebration, but the stillness after a storm. The kind of peace that comes when there's nothing left to fight for. I whispered into the quiet, "I forgive you, Amina." And though no one answered, the wind moved through the curtains like a sigh, as if the house itself heard me. I looked around the home that had seen everything, love, betrayal, justice, and loss, and realized I had come full circle. They laughed in court that day. But now I know, sometimes losing your family is the only way to win back yourself.